On today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, we'll be bringing in Nick Fairbanks for another edition of Fairbanks Friday. We discussed the 5-1 win for the Panthers over the Vancouver Canucks, where Matthew Tkachuk and Sam Bennett basically stole the show for the Cats. It was odd man rushes galore for the Panthers as well. We're going to discuss also how much of a confidence boost this is for the Panthers, as now they have 3 of a possible 6 points on this road trip, and we're going to preview Saturday's game against the Seattle Kraken, all on today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Friday, December 2nd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. And don't forget to send in your screenshot of your subscription to the Locked On Florida Panthers YouTube channel and your 5-star rating on whichever podcast app you listen to Locked On Panthers and send it over to me at LO_FLA Panthers on Twitter, or email at lockedonflapanthers@gmail.com. And today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Speaking of games starting, right from the jump, the Panthers, just 2 days after where the team just looked flat, nothing was great. There was nothing great to say about Tuesday's game. But then when you look at the start for this one, just odd man rushes galore, and really that was the real difference in this game for the Panthers, and just they were due for a big win as they defeat the Vancouver Canucks 5-1 on the road at Rogers Place, and now they have 3 of 6 points so far on this West Coast trip, with a good opportunity for them to salvage the road trip after it didn't look promising after the first 2 games. But let me bring in my guest on the show. It is a Fairbanks Friday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Nick, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back on, and I'm just glad it's a victory, Fairbanks Friday, because the last couple of games have been really hard to stomach.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny, a little bit behind the curtain for last week with Black Friday going on, and of course Thanksgiving. We were both like just in food comas after that, with you working early and then me also still in that food coma the morning of. It was just an episode was just not going to happen as far as both of our schedules being aligned to record a show. But thankfully, after 2 weeks, you're back, and we get to do a show, and a late night edition. As I see 1:29 on my clock right now on my laptop. So let's just get right into this game. Actually, before we do, let's talk about the pregame festivities for the Vancouver Canucks and the Florida Panthers. Of course, Roberto Luongo playing 8 seasons with the Vancouver Canucks, making the playoffs 6 times, but he's in the Ring of Honor instead of his jersey being retired. But the Sedin twins getting their jerseys retired and celebrating them and Luongo on the same night. What were your thoughts on the pregame festivities for Vancouver?
Number one, I thought it was unique. The fact that they brought the indigenous people out to kind of help celebrate and gave them the blankets. I thought it was very warm, congratulations and everything. So kudos to the Canucks organization for setting that up and partnering, again, with the local families there. And getting to Luongo not getting his number retired. I'm going to park it for right now because I understand why the Sedins were retired. They played their whole careers there. All right. They were a big part of that franchise for a long time. Roberto was there for a good 8 seasons, and he did lead them to the postseason and their Stanley Cup final back in 2010, 2011. And, he kind of forced his way to a trade. So you have to wonder, if some of those feelings and that contract that he had, kind of still stuck with ownership and management there. I know that they've kind of changed hands and everything, but the Sedins didn't have that kind of drama surrounding them. So I do think Luongo's number is going to be retired at some point, just not this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then when you're talking about like the contract and all that, the recapture penalty that they were paying for years on Roberto Luongo as well, so that took a little bit of a hit for Vancouver for so many years, even after the fact of him not even being there. But it was just a great celebration just to see both the franchises that he shared so many years with, and of course, talking about, and he even pointed out the whole jersey thing, and he's just like, I just wanted to celebrate it with all of you, and I think that was a really cool gesture by Roberto Luongo. Just all around a class act, and we are very thankful that he is part of this franchise for the Panthers. But on to the game. So, my goodness, Nick, after just a horrible game on Tuesday against the Calgary Flames and another blown lead against the Edmonton Oilers, and then just still without your captain, and the odd man rushes, man, 7-0 just in the first period alone for the Panthers. I mean, Matthew Tkachuk was just insane tonight with the amount of highlight reel passes that he was trying to connect with, like a backhand pass along the boards for Carter Verhaeghe as well. Carter Verhaeghe as well with just he was salivating, I'm sure, when he was skating through the neutral zone as well, seeing just how the Vancouver Canucks defense were just not having eyes on him neither. And the amount of passes that connected there too, even though some of them didn't go in, it was just it gave me a good indication that they were going to get the goals.
Yeah, you could definitely tell that the style that Florida wanted to play was exactly what Paul Maurice said in the pregame presser, that, they didn't have any practice yesterday. They completely had the team off, no meetings, nothing. And, it's probably a good thing that they did, just to kind of re-energize and step away from the game and everything. But, as you said, right from the get-go, players were going 100. And they had 7 scoring chances, right off the bat. I will be honest with you, I was a little worried because there were so many chances and they weren't going in. I'm like, is this going to be another game like this? And we're not going to be happy, and we're going to get goalied, and it's going to be 2-1, and Vancouver's going to walk out with a lucky win. But thankfully, all it took was 59 seconds. And you have 3 big goals, and Demko, I hope he's okay. Chase from the net, and the rest was basically history.
Yeah, and let's talk about those 3 goals in the 59 seconds, which is the fastest to 3 goals in franchise history in this almost 30-year history of the Florida Panthers. I mean, first one, the Panthers were really on the forecheck. Bennett and Carter Verhaeghe were really on it, and then as soon as Mahura gets it on the point, as he sees Matthew Tkachuk drawing into the low slot, and then just gets it to Tkachuk to get it past Thatcher Demko. And then Nick Cousins, that second goal doesn't happen without Nick Cousins. Nick Cousins creating the steal, working the puck around. Puck retrieval was also a big thing for the Panthers after shots as well. And then Forsling faking the shot from the top circle, and then through traffic as well. To I don't know if Thatcher Demko even saw that. And then the one that got him injured as well is, once again, another rush where Eric Stahl had an opportunity. Patrick Hornquist had an opportunity, and then Ryan Lomberg cleans it up, which I'm not sure if it was a hamstring or a groin for Thatcher Demko, but that was basically the game in those 59 seconds in 60 minutes in the full 60.
Yeah, rarely you see that kind of thing happen. I mean, it's kind of weird that Carolina scored earlier tonight, 3 goals in 64 seconds, thinking, hey, is that good? Well, hold on to your butts. Vamos Gatos has it in 59 seconds. So really good competition there. But the big thing to really think about is, Florida came out with a purpose tonight. They forechecked really well. They were getting on pucks. They were not allowing Vancouver a lot of chances in the first period. It's really in the second and third period when Vancouver started getting their footing and really starting to drive the play the way that they wanted to. But, without those 3 goals, this could have been a much closer game. And I will argue that the 4th goal was probably the biggest goal of the game, in my opinion, just because Florida had such a hard time getting that first goal. And that if, Vancouver got that first goal and started, a rally again, that, maybe if that 4th goal doesn't come, then maybe Vancouver makes it, they start believing in themselves and they come back.
Yeah. And just think about that 4th goal. And again, a rush.
Mm-hmm.
Just that's a theme here. I mean, even earlier in the first period, Gus Forsling had a rush 1-on-3 where Vancouver had 3 guys back. It was Forsling taking it all by himself. Eric Stahl, even on the PK, had a rush. Didn't get a shot on goal, but a rush to kill the penalty as well. Which I'm starting to kind of see the value of Eric Stahl on the PK as the season goes on. I'm not one to continue dunking on Eric Stahl, and he got his first point as a Panther tonight. And so the ice vision of all started by guess who? Matthew Tkachuk on that 4th goal.
Mm-hmm.
Tic-tac-toe, and then Carter Verhaeghe, everyone's drawing towards him, and then boom, gets it to Sam Bennett, 13 points in the last 12 games now for the Cats. He's your first line center for now.
Mm-hmm.
For now. Lundell is hurt. He got hurt, only played 2 shifts in the second period. And the whole shifting of other players to center as well. Etu Luosterainen had to double shift. Sam Reinhart, we even saw him at center as well for a little bit. We always knew he could play center, but it's been a while since we've seen him in that. But of course, different situations come for different things. But it was just Matthew Tkachuk, just too many great superlatives and so many great things to say about this guy.
Definitely, he's been the most consistent Panther, and he's now. I think he may be almost in the top 5 in scoring in the league right now, which is amazing considering where the team is at right now. But the one thing that separates him from some of the players that are on the team right now and why he's being successful is, one, he's really good in puck retrieval. He's good at anticipating where the puck is going to go, and second, he's really good at creating room. If you saw in tonight's game, most of the passes or a lot of the shots that he was able to get, he was able to create room and separation from the defenseman and give himself a good chance or give somebody else a chance to score. So the more that he does that, the more successful I believe this team is going to be. And, maybe Sam Bennett will benefit like he did with Jonathan Huberdeau.
Yeah, and the fact that Tkachuk is able to capitalize on another and on the opponent's mistakes as well. I mean, that 5th goal, just a pass where I don't know where they were passing that, and then Tkachuk taking that in to get it to Sam Bennett as well, and then of course there was a little bit of the physical element of the game where you had some major hits on Eric Stahl. It looks like that Luke Shen, it looks like he made the list from what we were talking about earlier in the chat as well. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we're going to discuss an injury update for the Panthers and how much of a confidence booster is a win like this for the Cats. But first, we're going to tell you all about BetOnline. And BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get all the latest odds and trends for every professional amateur league out there, from football, basketball, soccer, esports. We've got it all at BetOnline. And if you love sports podcasts, you'll find these at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get in your betting fix. Head to the website today. Use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Second segment on this Fairbanks Friday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Nick Fairbanks is back to discuss this 5-1 win over the Vancouver Canucks. And the broadcast mentioned that Eetu Luostarinen got a career high in time on ice tonight. Of course, it came with the situation of Anton Lundell getting hurt. And we actually do have a injury update on Anton Lundell via Jameson Olive of FloridaPanthers.com. So we have that update right here, pulling it up, and this is what Jameson tweeted. Quote, "It's not something that's long-term or concern. He got out there, it tightened up, and he couldn't go." So maybe, and with this road trip for the Panthers, discussed it earlier in the week about how they're structuring it, is the 2 games against Calgary and Edmonton, off day. A game against the Vancouver Canucks tonight, they're going to have an off day. No practice as well tomorrow for the Panthers. So even though it's a very short trip to Seattle, and then play Seattle, off day, and then practice on Monday before their Tuesday game. So their official practice won't be until Monday. So a lot of time to get a little bit of rest, especially when you're going out west. But 3 out of 6 points, Nick, so far, with the start not looking so promising. What do you take out of this game, and how you view the rest of the road trip after a game that the Florida Panthers they were due?
Definitely. All the analytics say that they're one of the top teams in the NHL still. But, unlike last season, the PDO, like I was tweeting about during the game, it just isn't there. So the puck luck isn't there this season. So, you have to think that at some point it's going to turn around. But as we know, and history has dictated before, that maybe this may be a season-long thing. But luckily tonight was a night that they were due, and that the pucks were going into the back of the net, and they were rewarded with their hard play and their good defensive structure. Going into the final 2 games on the road trip, it's got to be Spencer Knight in both games. As far as I'm concerned, and what we've talked about before, he's the number 1 goalie. Bobrovsky has not shown that he can handle the job responsibilities right now. You can say what you will, the contract's there, but this is it's a job. You're paid to perform, and if you're not getting it done, then you're going to be right in the pine. And Spencer should have won against Edmonton. It wasn't his fault with the 4 seconds left there, and I really hate saying 4 seconds with Florida. It seems like it's a common theme over the last 6 months, but you have a young goaltender that is making the saves when you need him to, giving the team a chance to win. Bob is not doing that at all. If anything, the goals that he's letting in are deflating, and the team just, they feel like they have to rally all the time with him in there. So Spencer's got to start. If the team plays like they did tonight and just is attacking the puck and forechecking, they have a good chance to win. And I will say it. I'm going to say it. They're going to beat Seattle on Saturday.
Whoa. And that's with Seattle going. I think you messaged this in our chat earlier. 11-1-1 in their last 13. Matty Beniers got an overtime goal 7 seconds in against Washington. We'll save that more for segment 3. But also the defenses as well. They were closing in gaps as well. I described the Vancouver Canucks D as Swiss cheese for this game. I mean, really all season for the Canucks. They've had issues for years. I don't think this is solely a Bruce Boudreau problem. This has been something that's been going on even when they had Travis Green and as their head coach and Jim Benning as their GM. So they're kind of like in that position of, should they rebuild or should they go for it? I mean, they signed JT Miller to a long-term extension, even though they could still trade him because his deal doesn't start next year. And then Bo Horvat, they contained Bo Horvat, who was third in the league in goals in the race for the Rocket Richard trophy with Jason Robertson and Connor McDavid. Jason Robertson, I mean, I haven't mentioned him too much on this show so far this season, but just the fact that they contained Bo Horvat as well in a game like tonight, and the fact that just like I mentioned earlier, Carver Hagee just salivating when it came to just skating through the Canucks defense. Just overall, just great awareness on the Panthers. Just I saw a focused team. Mark Stahl as well. I mentioned Eric Stahl earlier. Mark Stahl as well. A great game. I didn't feel like many pucks got past him, and usually when you don't mention a player's names too much as a defenseman, usually that means they're having a great game, and there's not much to complain about. So that just everyone showed up today for this one. And the only goal, let's also think about it like this, the only goal that they gave up to the Vancouver Canucks was on a rare rush by them. And Spencer, just one that he leaned a little forward to try to like maybe poke it to see if Forsling got beat, but it went 5-hole on him. But listen, goals like that, one goal like that, you're not going to complain too much.
No, and there's two things about that. So that goal was created, and I forget the player who scored it. I know he's the fourth line winger for them, Joshua. I'm sorry. Yeah, he had a big hit earlier on that shift that really kind of set the tone of what he was going to do out there. And lo and behold, he gets a 2-on-1 rush. He was trying to pass it off, to the winger or the center that was actually going down to the blue paint there, and just got a lucky, I guess, shot that went through Spencer, unfortunately. So, again, it's a soft goal, but at the same time, it happens. If that happened to Bob, pretty sure we'd all be irate right now. Yeah. But still, it's just one of those things, like, he tried to play the best he could, and it was just a lucky shot in 5-hole. The other thing about it too is, you talk about, defensemen or players that we don't talk about, and that being a good thing. I remember a couple of years ago, there was a player called Mark Pysyk, the Prius.
The hybrid.
Yes. His first season with Florida, nobody ever talked about him, ever. He was the Panthers' best defenseman that season, and that was the season, I think, that they got rid of Goodbranson, that they tried to, do this whole, like, analytics and also just, like, do everything off the rush. He was their best defenseman, and he got a contract out of that. And, to hear that the defense is starting to come, together now, besides Gudas, who for the fourth time in 4 games got a penalty, I think he's kind of playing outside of his position right now, but I can understand why he's pressing. But, I think the whole team had to tonight. You have the Lundell injury. You have Barkov that, we don't know what's going on with him. It's a non-COVID illness, but hopefully he's back soon. So everybody had to kind of, pull up their bootstraps and really contribute to tonight. And you saw a full team effort.
Yeah, and then Radko Gudas getting into a fight with JT Miller after a very clean hit earlier as well. So, yeah, sometimes out of position, sometimes out skates a little bit, and then gets his skates caught up in another player, causing a trip or too excited with the stick as well. So, of course, things that are needing to be cleaned up, but him and Mahura earlier in the season, wonderful start. They were the biggest beneficiaries of this coaching staff early on. That's for sure. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we're going to discuss the Florida Panthers upcoming game against the Seattle Kraken. So stay right here on Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Third and final segment here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast on this Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. And Nick, man, I'm still pretty pumped because this has been a weird week as far as approach to the show, as far as the building of frustration from two blown leads. It was not. I was not happy recording, that's for sure. And of course, I of course getting a little bit of a big picture view of as well with David Dwork to kind of like, pump the brakes emotionally on the season as well. So for those listening, if you haven't listened to my interview with David Dwork, that's Wednesday's show. So if you want to listen to that after you listen to this, if you haven't had a chance to listen to it, please do. David Dwork, a great mind for as far as knowing this team in and out. But let's preview Saturday's game against the Kraken. So 11-1-1, a team that the Florida Panthers still haven't beaten in their short history. Last year was just weird when it comes to President's Trophy winning team, expansion team who had a lot of criticism due to how they conducted the expansion draft. Of course, Chris Drieger is not playing, still out with an ACL injury. Martin Jones was looking like San Jose Sharks Martin Jones for a little bit in the beginning of the season, but has fallen off a little bit and has kept Seattle in games, even has a shutout even on the season. But Matty Beniers, likely the Calder Trophy winner this year, mentioned it earlier how he got a game-winning goal against the Capitals 7 seconds in, and even though there's drama with after they drafted Shane Wright, now I believe he's still down in the AHL with Coachella Valley. He scored in like his first shift, I believe, in the AHL. Amazing what a confidence boost can do being sent down to the AHL. But how do you forecast? Well, you already did forecast this game. You said that the Florida Panthers were gonna defeat the Kraken, but I want you to elaborate on that prediction.
So, like I said earlier in the show, it's got to be Spencer Knight in goal. That's the only chance they're really going to have, in my opinion. Then the team, depending on injuries, they need to come together. They may need to put Reinhardt at center again and run those four lines. These two, Luostarinen, might have to get more playing time as well. He's very good defensive, responsibly defensive, or the other way around. The biggest thing is that the team needs to play within themselves and not try to get into a track meet. It's not what this team is built for. It's not the way the system is going to work. They need to play the chip game, and they also need to be on the forecheck. I think that they'll be able to do that, and it's just because I think the Kraken are going to try and open it up a little bit, and I think the defense and the defensive structure that they have will be able to tame them a little bit. I mean, they did against Boston. They did against Carolina. I think this system is actually built to beat the top-tier teams, the teams that are actually going to be in the playoffs. Now, I know a lot of people are not very happy with that right now because, listen, they lost against St. Louis. They blew a 4-1 lead. They lost against Edmonton. They lost against Calgary. They've lost other games like Columbus. But you have to look at the big yes.
Arizona.
You have yes. You know what? I just really hope that list stops, after tonight. But as long as they play the way that they're supposed to, they can beat any team. And with the puck luck coming their way now, I think this game actually proves it. I think they'll find a way to win, and I'm not going to give a score or anything, but I think it'll be close.
Yeah, and who's leading the Kraken in goals?
Is it McCann?
Yes, former Florida Panther Jared McCann. So he is leading. He is leading the way with goals for the Seattle Kraken. But I mean, for Seattle, I mean, they are the type of team that's high scoring, kind of like what the Panthers were last year. I mean, both of their goaltenders, Martin Jones and Philip Grubauer, who Grubauer was in the Vezina conversation just 2 seasons ago before signing with Seattle, and I can see easily a high scoring game. I know there's a lot of criticism of Dave Haxtell as well, especially from his time in Philadelphia as well. But I think if there's one thing to expect on Saturday night, I think we should expect a lot of goals because they can score, but Seattle also has a hard time defending, and I think that's an opportunity for the Panthers to. I know you say you don't want to get into a track meet, but I think that if the Panthers are able to, I think they can keep up with Seattle.
One thing I don't want to see, and as you were saying, the track meet, I'd be okay with it, but I don't want Florida to get out ahead like they did tonight, like 3-0, 4-1, and then go into a defensive show. You're not going to win games doing that. I mean, that can happen and that can help in the playoffs, but not in the regular season. I just think that, number one, you're allowing the other team more opportunities, more shots, and you're putting your guys out to dry doing that. And, it becomes harder, it becomes more of a chore to defend instead of taking the offense to the other team. So, if it's going to be a track meet, I hope Florida has the mindset that they're not going to sit back, after they get a lead and allow the Kraken to come back.
Yeah, and in the Pacific Division, they're second in their division in goals for, just behind the LA Kings, but LA also gives up a lot of goals too, which they put Cal Peterson on waivers after a start of a 3x5 deal. So not looking good in as far as the goaltending department when they have like an aging Jonathan Quick as well. So, but hey, that's definitely what we can expect, and hopefully it's and the great thing about tonight's game, let's go a little bit back to tonight, where even when the Vancouver Canucks came out with controlling the possession, we never really felt that there was too much pressure on Spencer Knight, that he still had time to get set and to make saves as well. A few times that they got into the slot, but even then with that I believe it was 17-5 shot on goal advantage in the third period. Double checking as we speak, 17-5. Even then, it was really, and you mentioned it best. The fourth goal, which happened in the second period, the separation, just really helped this team, and then of course capitalizing on the mistake with Matthew Tkachuk in Vancouver's zone. So Vancouver's in shambles. It's been something that's been talked about even off the ice as well, with the whole Rachel Dorier situation.
Yep.
And the Panthers found a way to take advantage tonight. And you take your wins, and you know that you're a better team than them. You move on. Seattle, with of course the storylines with the whole first win against them. And hey, we could be talking about positive notes come Monday. So I feel good after tonight. I definitely do. It was definitely a boost after the first two games.
Most definitely, and I think going into the weekend, playing Seattle, and then who are they playing after that?
Winnipeg on Tuesday.
Okay. Ooh, and Winnipeg's been playing very well.
Hellebuck's been great.
Yeah. If anything, Winnipeg has been getting the best or the second best goaltending in the league. So no surprise there. But if Florida can find a way to beat Seattle and then claw a point out of Winnipeg, this will be a successful road trip. Would we have wanted the extra point out of Edmonton? Of course, but beggars can't be choosers. You get all the points that you can right now, and I think just getting another 3 points on this road trip, you're going to be fine. And I think that sets up nicely going into December. As far as the homestand that they're going to be there, I know we play Detroit on the 8th. I will be there. and hopefully that'll be a good, entertaining game. But it's really coming down to, putting the season into little sections, and when are you going to make your move right now. So good thing is they're only a point out of a playoff spot right now. I know everybody thought the sky was falling, but let's take a step back still. They're still within playoff range and everything. It's not like they're 8 points out or anything like that. There's still plenty of time, and who knows, maybe they can go on a 5, 6, 7, 8 game run and they're solidly in a playoff spot. So, I'm hopeful after tonight.
Yeah, when you talk about 5, 6, 7 games in a row, they showed that highlight of 2016 when the winning streak ended in Vancouver, and then tempers flaring, and then
Yeah,
looking at all the former Panthers just saying, Eric Branson, Jaromir Jagr, Al Montoya. I'm just like naming people left and right. I was like, it was a cool little throwback that the broadcast had today, despite that being an L for the Panthers and all. But Nick, I want to thank you for joining me once again on this Fairbanks Friday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Tell everybody where they can find you online.
you guys can find me on Twitter at Prudentia0. I am definitely live tweeting during games and everything. So if you guys want to stop on by, we can chit chat. And I hope to be back here next Thursday. I know the Detroit game is then, so maybe we'll do one live, or maybe we'll do one just after the post game.
Absolutely, and we'll definitely be here for that. So thank you so much, Nick, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Make sure to subscribe to all the shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, make sure you listen to today's episode of Locked On Sports Today. Locked On Sports Today gives you a daily podcast on the entirety of the sports scene with exclusive interviews and the take of the day. Locked On Sports Today, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. So I'm Armando Velez with Nick Fairbanks. And you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.